Good day guys, it's me Ace Striker 21. Today we do have a new topic to tackle. I hope that you would like it guys, so please listen carefully. On today's video we are going to tackle about famous motorcycle builders from past. So let's start guys. There have been many individuals in the last 100 years that have shaped motorcycle culture as we know it by their contributions to the industry. Many of these great builders have passed on and many new young people are picking up the torch to carry it on further. Some of the most famous motorcycle builders to have ever lived include William Harley, Arthur Davidson, Oscar Hedstrom, Ed Roth, Indian Larry, Brian Jones, Jesse James, Paul Tutel Sr., Deus Ex Machina, Roland Sands Design. Continue reading below for a more comprehensive list of the famous builders of the past and the present. Past builders. Ed Roth. Ed Big Daddy Roth became famous in the 50s and 60s in Southern California and was best known for his hot rod character of Rat Fink, which he created. He was born in 1932 and was always tinkering and building things since he was young. Roth began building wild hot rod cars and custom motorcycles and being featured on dozens of magazines, and was a co-founder of the Custom Culture Company. The Rayvale Toy Company even manufactured scale models of all his motorcycles and hot rods to sell as children's toys. When Ed was 20 years old he began holding parties at his motorcycle shop and got involved with many of the local motorcycle clubs. He became deeply involved with Hells Angels and in his later years admitted to doing many things he was horribly ashamed of. In his later years he joined a Christian church and moved to a small town in Utah to have a more simple lifestyle. He continued to do custom builds until he died. The Henry Ford Auto Museum in Detroit houses several of Ed's most wild builds, and there is a Rat Fink reunion held in Manti, Utah every year in June to commemorate his work. Indian Larry Lawrence Desmet was born in 1949 in New York and became known as Indian Larry in 1980 while riding a chopped Indian motorcycle. Indian Larry was not very well known until his last few years of life after competing in motorcycle building competitions and performing at motorcycle rallies. When Larry was young, his Scoutmaster raced Indian motorcycles, which had a large impact on the path he followed in life. Larry's first build was adding a lawnmower engine to his sister's tricycle. His sister was not as enthused about it as Larry was. His first motorcycle was a 1939 Harley Knucklehead. He took it completely apart and over the next year he built it back to what he wanted. A month before he was to graduate from high school, he left home and joined his sister in California to be part of the 1960s outcast crowd. He spiraled into drug addiction and his sister was murdered, which sent him further into addiction. He was shot by police and arrested in 1972 after robbing a bank and spent several years in prison. He earned his get and decided to become a master welder and mechanic. After prison, Larry moved back to New York and got involved in the growing chopper scene of the 80s, and was featured on several magazine covers. Larry died when he was 55 while performing motorcycle stunts in North Carolina. His motorcycles and his rough-and-tumble lifestyle have only gained traction since his death. Arlen Ness. Arlen Ness was born in 1939 in Minnesota and moved to San Lorenzo, California when he was still young. When Arlen was young he worked at a bowling alley and bowled semi-professionally later in life. He used earnings from bowling to buy his first motorcycle, a 1947 Harley Knucklehead. Arlen grew in popularity in the California motorcycle scene after a few of his builds, and he grew even more popular after he started making custom parts for Harleys and Indians. As time went on he started being featured in more and more magazines. After 30 years at his motorcycle shop, he moved to a larger shop in Dublin, California where he housed over 40 of HS custom builds for people to come look at. One of his most famous motorcycles is the Mach Ness, a jet-powered motorcycle with the power plant from a helicopter. His son Corey has taken over the family business and continues to build beautiful bikes and custom parts for the automotive industry. George M. Hendy George Hendy was born in 1866 and became famous by being the USA national bicycle champion and setting several world records. He started his own bicycle company in 1895 in Springfield, Massachusetts, and was bankrupt 3 years later. After his first failed business, he started a manufacturing company that would make his name infamous forever, the Indian Hendy Manufacturing Company. He built and sold bicycles for several years and then created his first motorized bicycle in 1901. By 1912, Indian Hendy Manufacturing was the largest motorcycle company in the world, and they were producing over 32,000 units per year. They changed the business name to Indian Motorcycle Company in 1923, but Hendy had already retired by that point. After retiring from the motorcycle industry, Hendy bred cattle and chickens on his 500-acre farm. He died in 1943 at the age of 76. Oscar Hedstrom Oscar was born in Sweden in 1871, and he immigrated to the United States with his family when he was just 9 years old. They settled in Brooklyn, New York City, and he spent much of his childhood riding bicycles and rebuilding them to learn how they worked. When he was 16, he got a job as an engineering apprentice at a watch shop where he learned to cast and build parts for custom watches. He also began building carburetors and mounting gasoline engines on bicycles, and this is when he met George Hendy. Hendy was impressed with the work of Hedstrom and asked him to build a design for a mass-produced motorized bicycle. The two men worked well together over the next several years as the Indian motorcycle business grew rapidly. But both men left the company due to problems they had with the board of directors misleading investors. Hedstrom retired and lived on his estate on the banks of the Connecticut River until his death in 1960. William Harley was born in 1880 in Wisconsin and got his first job at the age of 15 at the Meiselbach Bicycle Factory. In 1901, William started drawing up plans to mount a small gasoline engine to a bicycle with his childhood friend Arthur Davidson. Harley and Davidson founded their company in 1903, and Harley received a degree in mechanical engineering in 1907. Harley married his lifelong partner in 1910 and stayed with her until his death in 1943. Harley worked at Harley-Davidson until the day he died. He loved his job and seeing his company grow. Arthur Davidson was born in 1881 in Wisconsin after both of his parents and grandparents immigrated from Europe. In 1903 he went into business with lifelong friend William Harley, building motorcycles in a family shed. During World War II, Harley-Davidson sold thousands of motorcycles at highly discounted prices to the U.S. military in hopes to secure the government contract for military motorcycles. That way, when the servicemen we got home from the war, they would already know how to work on Harleys and would want to buy one. Arthur was killed in a car accident along with his wife and 2 of his children in 1950. Wayne Moulton was born in 1932 in Heber City, Utah. Wayne was a motorcycle designer and is referred to as the father of the Japanese cruiser. Wayne gave a lot of designs to the Japanese motorcycle companies as they were trying to emerge in the U.S. market. While working at Kawasaki, Moulton served as the manager of technical operations and released his design for the limited series motorcycles, which became hugely successful in the US, and the other Japanese manufacturers followed his styling cues. Moulton was offered a higher paid post for Triumph America in the mid-1970s and was asked to try and save the company. Moulton introduced several changes that the manufacturer needed to make in order to survive in the U.S. market, but it seemed that it was already too late for the British company. Moulton said his favorite motorcycle he ever designed was the Triumph T140 TSX. Roy Suarez Garcia was known throughout his life as Chicano Roy and was born in 1945. He is credited with inventing a lot of custom parts for motorcycles that many manufacturers still use today. Chicana Roy was one of the first Hispanic custom motorcycle builders to make the cover of all the biggest motorcycle magazines, which was not an easy thing for minority groups to do back then. One of Roy's most famous inventions was the molded frame. It was a design that made the frame and the tank look like it was all one continuous piece, but the tank could be unbolted if it was damaged. Brian Jones Brian was a motorcycle designer and engineer and was born in the UK in 1928. Brian began by working for Douglas Motorcycles and then soon moved to BSA for several years. BSA at the time was the largest motorcycle manufacturer in the world. He decided to move jobs again and worked for Norton Motorcycle for several years until finally settling down with Triumph. Brian was instrumental in bringing change to the Triumph brand, but Japanese motorcycle companies were so far ahead that it was hard to catch up and compete with such innovation. In the mid-70s Brian started adding things like electric start, anti-vibration balancers, and by keeping the engines compliant with the ever stricter U.S. government laws surrounding motor vehicles. Despite Jones's best efforts, Triumph went under in 1983. Had they been able to release some of those ideas a few years earlier, there's no way of knowing what the fate of Triumph would have been. Ben Hardy was born in 1921 in Lincoln County, Georgia and later moved to Los Angeles to follow his passion for motorcycles. Ben created two of the most iconic motorcycles ever made, the Captain America and Billy Choppers from the famous classic movie Easy Rider. For many years other people took the credit for creating the motorcycles. Even Peter Fonda said that he built Captain America himself. As time has gone on, people were able to connect the dots more and more, and finally Ben Hardy has received the recognition he deserves for building those iconic masterpieces. Hardy passed away in 1994 but was able to pass on his customization skills to hundreds of local riders in LA. That's all for today. Wait for the part 2 of this The Present Motorcycle Builders on my next video. Thanks for watching guys, don't forget like and subscribe.